Welcome back. This is Chicken Philosophy. You can see that over all this stuff. Carl Jung's Black Books, Part 53. If you're a little confused, you might want to start with Part 1. You can do so by clicking up there. What we do when there's three, you might have seen the wheel, there's Edward, Gwydion, BT. When it's BT reading Carl Jung, and since there's 5 books, that happens 1 out of every 15 episodes of Chicken Philosophy. So it's as special as something that happens 1 out of 15 times. We do a full spread here to get a full divinatory, glimpse, perhaps, into what we're going to be reading from Carl Jung's Black Books today before we read it. So, let's start with the rune. That rune is called Othilla, meaning separation. Why do I feel like we've gotten that rune before? Inherited property or possessions, also native land or home. Okay, something got mixed up. We've got a couple of things that are repeats from before. This is definitely a repeat from before. Editor Edward, could you show us? So, if my calculations are correct, you just saw a flashback to the last time we got this. And that was the time where he met with the librarian, and his native land or home I interpreted as being Christianity. So we'll see if there's any relationship. And if I'm not mistaken, the Golden Dawn Ritual Tarot card here is also the same one we got on that particular day. And I fully shuffled the deck today. So there's something to the fact that a couple of these divinatory symbols are the same as that particular episode with the librarian, if I'm not mistaken. The 9 of Wands reversed on my dad's old Rider-Waite. His bandaged head indicates the man has already fought and is prepared to fight again. The staves behind him suggest the boundary of that which he protects. Reversed, weakness, ill health, adversity, displeasure, obstacles to be overcome. Again, I feel like we've gotten that one before, but we'll move along and we'll check back with these after the reading and see if there's any relationship to the reading, and also we'll have Editor Edward do that, and he'll have the most insight of all because he'll not only have been me at one time talking to you as I am right now, but he will have edited me talking to you as I am right now, all the way through to the end, and had time to think about it and look at it. And so that's what we do these days. We evolve our traditions here on Chicken Philosophy over time, much like traditions evolve in real life or in history or in group minds, what have you. As mentioned, we have the Queen of Swords, a graceful woman with curly waving hair, like a seated queen upon a throne and crowned. Beneath the throne are gray cumulus clouds. Her general attire is similar to that of the Queen of Wands, but she wears as a crest a winged child's head, like the head of an infantile cherub, seen sculptured on the tombs, a drawn sword in one hand, and in the other a large bearded, nearly severed head of a man. All right? Intensely perceptive, keen observation, subtle, quick, confident, often perseveringly accurate in superficial things, graceful, fond of dancing and balancing, ill-dignified. Well, okay, it's not ill-dignified because we don't do that with the Golden Dawn Tarot in my household. The 6 of Swords from my teenage self's old Celtic tarot. In a state of dejection, a woman and child are ferried across the water to a calm shore. That's from the Rider-Waite. Divinatory meaning, the future will be better. Success after anxieties, journey to a new home by water. Sending someone to represent you in an undertaking, also a journey in consciousness. I feel like I want to look up the Golden Dawn Ritual Tarot definition real quick. Success after anxiety and trouble. Selfishness, beauty, conceit, but sometimes modesty therein, dominion, patience, labor, etc., according to dignity. Tiferet of Vav. So swords means Vav, means Yetzirah, the world of formation, and Tiferet means 6. So labor, work, journey by water, herein rule Rehayal and Yeziel. So if you take 3 lines from Exodus, 3 particular lines, and write them front to back and back to front and pile them on top of each other and then circle every group with 3 letters, then you get 72 groups, because each of those 3 sentences in the original Hebrew has 72 letters. Whoa! And then if you add either I or L to the end of each of those groups of 3 letters, then you get the Shem Foresh. Now you know. Okay, next, in the White Eagle Medicine Wheel cards, we have the Badger, Editor Edward. Mushroom. Thank you, Editor Edward. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Tenacity, anger, healing. Badger will organize, day to day. Live life in order is what it will say. And there's like a page written about it, but for the sake of brevity, brevity is the soul of wit. Thank you, Polonius. The magical item, which Carl Jung will symbolically be armed with today, is the ring of water walking. The ring of water walking. So this is kind of like what Jesus gave Peter, you might say. So I think you can walk on water when you have this ring. That seems useful, especially if you're dealing with emotions. While wearing this ring, you can stand on and move across any liquid surface as if it were solid ground. That's pretty cool. The villain of today's nightmare is the Cyclops. Let's put a big one of these up on the screen, Editor Edwin. Thank you. It never really says anything here. Huge giant, chaotic neutral. Poor depth perception. The Cyclops has disadvantage on any attack roll. It's just like instructions on how to like incorporate this monster into your D&D game. So there's not a whole lot of information there, but I do like to have a monster in these readings. So there we have it. Now we will get to the reading, and we will see if any of that was prophetic. January 19th, 1914. I am flagging. I can't. I do not act. It acts through me. I wait. The door should be lifted off its hinges to provide a free passage between here and there, between yes and no, between above and below, between left and right. Airy passages should be built between all opposed things. Light, smooth streets should lead from one pole to the other. Scales should be set up, whose pointer sways gently. A flame should burn that cannot be blown out by the wind. A stream should flow to its deepest goal. The herds of wild animals should move to their feeding grounds along their old game paths. An arrow should fly its bent trajectory. A thought should rise like a lark from the seed. And life? Life should proceed from birth to death and from death to birth, from sense to madness and from madness to sense. Unbroken, like the path of the sun, everything should proceed on this path. Little line, divider line. Outrage lurks behind the door. Let it lurk. If you wait for it, it will come. Enjoy the undiminished light and be entirely yourself. Another divider line. The speech of the confused is like chopped straw, the professor says. Thus the speech of the healthy is like unchopped straw, the lunatic says, simply longer. Another line. Now I think he's going under. Dreary nausea lies on me. Hell is a good word for this state. I toy casually and terribly with myself. What if this is the way of life? One only needs to walk it. Is it day or night? Am I asleep or awake? Have I eaten or not? Am I alive or have I already died? Blind darkness besieges me. A gray wall, a gray worm of twilight crawls along it, like a round, heavy, swollen lizard. It has a round face and laughs. The laughter is convulsive and actually relieving. I open my eyes. The fat cook is standing before me. Quote, "You're a sound sleeper. You've slept for more than an hour." End quote. Is he still in that inn with the lady that also had read, whose mother had given her Imitatio Christi, and he dreamt that the librarian had called the police and had him put in the madhouse? Was it all a dream within a dream? Let's find out. Really? Have I slept? I must have dreamed. What a dreadful play. Cross out A. I fell asleep in this kitchen. Kitchen is underlined. Is this really the realm of the mothers? Cook. The cook. C, it says C. I'm assuming that stands for cook. Have a glass of water. You're still thoroughly drowsy. Yes, this sleep can make one drunk. Where is my Thomas? There it lies, open at the 21st chapter. Quote, "My soul in everything and yet beyond everything, you must find your rest in the Lord, for he is the eternal rest of the saints." End quote. Again, I find it very impressive that in his vision, in his dream state, are exact quotes on exact pages of particular books. That's interesting. Okay, anyway, I read this sentence aloud, putting an astonished question mark by every word. I'm imagining there was a question mark, an astonished question mark by every word. Let's just have a little fun with this. My soul in everything and yet beyond everything, you must find your rest in the Lord. It's almost over. For he is the eternal rest of the saints. Okay, Carl, I think you were being a little hyperbolic there, because it's a little ridiculous to put an astonished question mark by every word in that quote, as we have just found out. You're welcome. Okay, sorry. If you fell asleep with this sentence, you must really have had a beautiful dream. I certainly dreamed. I will think about the dream. Incidentally, can you tell me whose cook you are? Cook. The librarian's. He loves good cooking, and I have been with him for many years. Oh, I had no idea that the librarian had such a kitchen. Cook. Yes, you must know that he's a gourmet. Farewell, Madame Cook, and thank you for the accommodation. Cook. You are most welcome, and the pleasure was entirely mine. Now I am outside. So that was the librarian's kitchen. Does he really know what food is prepared inside? He has certainly never gone in there for a temple sleep. He only eats bourgeois there. He only eats bourgeois there. That's what it says. I think that I'll return the Thomas to him. I enter the library. Everything is the same as before. Librarian. Good evening. Here you are again, is the voice I've chosen to give the librarian today. Good evening, Mr. Librarian. I've come to return the Thomas. I sat down for a bit in your kitchen next door to read, without suspecting that it's your kitchen. Librarian, please, there's no problem whatsoever. Hopefully my cook received you well. I can't complain about the reception. I even had an afternoon sleep over Thomas. Librarian, that doesn't surprise me. These prayer books are terribly boring. Yes, for people like us. But your cook finds the little book very edifying. Oh, Carl Jung has chosen a side, and he switched. He switched sides from the last time. This and this were up on the screen. Anyway, let's see where this goes. Librarian, well, yes, for the cook. Have you ever had an incubation sleep in your kitchen? Librarian, laughing, no, I've never entertained such a strange idea. Let me say that you'd learn a lot that way about your kitchen. Adieu, sir. I go outside into the hallway and open the green curtains. Outside, a beautiful large hall with pillars and a view of a magnificent garden. Klingsmore's magical garden. Those two over Amfortas and Kundry. Or rather, just what am I looking at? Is it the librarian and Kundry is his cook? He is pale and has a bad stomach. She is disappointed and furious. Klingsor is standing to the left, holding the feather the librarian used to tuck behind his ear. Repulsive play. Klingsor bears my features. But look, Parsifal enters from the right. He also has my features. Klingsor angrily throws his feather at Parsifal, but the latter catches it. The scene changes. A simple room. On a writing desk sits Parsifal, in modern clothes, and describes the miracles of his hero quest. And now I kneel down. The Good Friday service begins. Parsifal enters slowly, his head covered with a black helmet. He wears the lion's skin and club and modern black trousers. I bristle and stretch out my hand avertingly. Quote, desecrator of the sanctuary, end quote, roars in my ears. Parsifal uncovers his head. It is me, travestied in the hero. Yet there is no Gurnimans to atone for and consecrate him. Kundry stands in the distance, covering her head and laughing. I patiently take off my armor and go to the spring wearing a white penitent's shirt, where I wash my hands and feet on my own and baptize myself in the name of the one that I am. Then I take off my penitent's shirt and put on my civilian clothes. I walk out of the scene and approach myself, I who am still kneeling down, ossified. I rise and become one with myself. Well, okay. I do recall from the introductory first book that Carl Jung went through a am I Jesus phase. I mean, that's kind of happened a little bit before when he was talking to what's her name, the one who had John the Baptist killed. You know who I'm talking about. All right. Wow. Geez. That was really something, and it's interesting how that whole scene was a dream within a dream, where the librarian didn't actually have him committed, but then after the experience of being committed for being, for reading this Christian book and thinking the librarian's going to have him committed, then he goes in and he's like, yeah, well, you and I, we think that this is boring. Really, Carl's kind of wavering a bit. He's like, it's interesting. I mean, if you've been following, then like he met the anchorite, and from the anchorite's perspective, he was like too pagan. But when he met the pagan red man, he was too Christian. But then when he met them both together, and they had this weird dysfunctional relationship, and they both just thought he was the devil. And then he goes to the nihilistic librarian, and he's too Christian. And then he goes to the cook and gets along with her. But then he thinks the nihilistic librarian's going to commit him, so he goes back to the nihilistic librarian and says, yeah, you and I think Christianity is boring. So I don't know, it's interesting. It's interesting watching him go through this process. All right, Editor Edward, I'll turn it over to you for a little bit. Can you give us a little bit of insight as to how the cards and rune we pulled at the beginning might relate with what we just read?
Okay. So as you mentioned, the rune up here is the same as in episode 50, which was the one where Carl Jung first met the librarian and got the book on imitation of Christ, and the librarian was a bit, oh, you don't seem like the sort of person who would like that. And he's like, well, I'm going to use it for prayer. So he was kind of setting himself up as like, yeah, I'm one of those Jesus freaks. And the librarian was like, that's odd. I thought you were a modern intellectual person. I like Nietzsche, that kind of thing. So that was what was happening the last time this was there, and I had interpreted that the possessions and inheritance as being Carl Jung's inheritance of Christianity from being born and raised in Northern Europe. So there's that. Then the Queen of Swords, as you mentioned, is also a repeat. So at first I was thinking maybe she's related to the cook, though that of course is counterintuitive because the cook doesn't seem anything like the woman with the severed head. So perhaps she is actually more specifically related to the Nietzschean librarian. Maybe. But looking at the ones that are different this time. So here, the Rider-Waite, my dad's Rider-Waite, today is the 9 of Wands reversed. Last time, remember last time? It was the 4 of Pentacles reversed. And we had interpreted that as that he was being stingy with his inheritance, which we'd established as being Christianity. Or something, maybe. But this time, we have the 9 of Wands reversed, that he has fought and will fight again, and he's defending himself, and he has obstacles to overcome. So it seems like, when he was in the madhouse in the previous, 2 episodes, right? I think he went into the madhouse 2 episodes ago in 51, and then he was still in the madhouse in 52. Now he's waking up and realizing he was never in the madhouse. It was all just a bad dream within a dream, of course, or within a active imagination experience. Whatever this is that he's doing, which has never been made clear in anything that we've read so far. I think that people do their best to imitate what he did, but nobody's exactly sure what he was doing 100%. So, yeah, that battle, the whole madhouse thing has been overcome. He's managed to find a way, but he's still in a defensive position, basically, and it's reversed, so it's not like that great of a situation. All right, so moving along to the Celtic tarot over here. Today it was the Six of Swords. Last time it was the Page of Cups. And we had guessed that perhaps that was related to Tony Wolfe. I mean, that's just a guess. Maybe the other one. Someone in his life that was a younger woman. Maybe. I mean, if this turns out to be the librarian, then maybe this doesn't necessarily need to be female. But yeah, so we're not really sure what that was 3 episodes ago, but today it was the Six of Swords, success after anxieties, journey in consciousness, which kind of relates to the Nine of Wands reversed. I mean, they're both like, okay, we did battle and we're okay now. We're in a, Nine of Wands reversed, like we're in a defensive position still. Six of Swords is like, okay, we succeeded. We got through that battle. We haven't won the war, but we won the battle. The one thing I thought was interesting was selfishness and conceit, but with modesty. Seems to me like the way that he's resolved it is like, now that he's like played out this scenario in his head, like if I really stand by this, I am praying over here with the Imitation of Christ book, then, maybe they'll just lock me up. So instead, I'm going to go into agreement with the Nietzschean librarian. And for selfish reasons, like, does he really believe this? Or is he just, I'm gonna just agree with him. I'm just gonna act like he and I are the same. So that's, I don't know, but with modesty, he's kind of being, he's not being overtly arrogant. He's being a little selfish, and he's kind of like, I'll go into agreement with your arrogance from a position of humility. It's interesting. Okay, so moving along, the badger. Last time it was the eagle. And it was all about just fly over it all, just ignore it all, just go with your faith, just, ignore the world below and fly up in the clouds. And whatever you say, okay, you can love Nietzsche, but I love Jesus, but today he's being more like, okay, let's, be tenacious, angry, healing, and organized, live life in order, like deal with each situation as it comes up. So that's interesting, and it seems to, imply like an approach of like, okay, if I'm talking to a religious person, I'll talk in terms of religion. If I'm talking to an atheist, then I won't force them into religion. I'll just like work with people where they are. And I mean, that's interesting because like later on in, his legacy anyway, Jungian thought is like kind of a bridge. I mean, it serves, at least in my life, it's served to be a bridge where I can, sometimes religious people don't like it because they feel like you're reducing the true magic, the true divinity, the realness of the angels, you're reducing it to like something psychological, something in the unconscious. So sometimes people that are on the extreme end of that spectrum don't like it. But people who are a little less extreme, and maybe they have their own internal doubts, Jung can help to soothe those doubts and allow them to, find peace between their warring lobes, the left brain, right brain. It's not an exact science, but the just sort of using that as a metaphor, as a manner of speech. The left brain says none of this is real. The right brain says, well, maybe it is. And then you can come in with the Jung and say, well, it's real in the sense that it's a shared language of symbols that humans of various communities use for some reason. And they go, well, okay, you kind of like, yeah, and maybe it's real. Well, probably not, but maybe, so then you can kind of like find a way of getting a figure eight going between the parts of yourself. So anyway, the badger, yeah, maybe that's related to that. I don't know. So then today it was his magical item that he had to, that he was armed with. It was the ring of water walking, allowed him to walk on water. A lot of Peter imagery, and then that made me think of how Peter denied Christ 3 times when the cock crowed, or before the cock crowed, or before the cock crowed 3 times, depending on which gospel you're reading, that whole thing. He's basically saying to the librarian, I don't know this Jesus, but really I do. So that's a little bit of a Peter connection with the walking on water. Peter walked on water. Jesus, in a sense, in a D&D sense, gave Peter this gift of the ring of water walking. But with the caveat that as soon as you doubt it, then you fall in the water. So it's sort of like the new Crow remake. Never mind. Bad reference. Last time it was the belt of dwarven kind, I believe that's called. So it seemed like, and he was up against the Drider last time. So he had a belt that helped with charisma in interacting with dwarves, but he was up against the freaking Drider. So it seemed like he didn't have the right tool for the situation he was in. Where today, he's up against a Cyclops, which is already like, I can't see, and I only have one eye. So the librarian kind of didn't see, the Cyclops has no depth perception, so the librarian wasn't able to see that Carl Jung was actually kind of managing. And kind of like, well, I was over with your cook reading this book in all sincerity, and I told you yesterday that I was doing it prayerfully. But today I'm telling you, I fell asleep reading that boring Christianity book. And guys like you and I don't, take stuff like that seriously. So the librarian just sort of was like, all right, yeah, okay. He was like the Cyclops that couldn't see. And Carl Jung was walking on the water of his own emotions and not falling into them and being overwhelmed by them. Interesting side note is the eagle in astrology, and again, there's the whole thing about this is the medicine wheel eagle, not an astrology eagle, but the eagle is related to Scorpio, which is a water sign, counterintuitively, because the eagle flies like Aquarius, which means water bearer is an air sign. There's a lot of this kind of like caduceus swapping of places, of elements and those things. But anyway, so he had this very powerful tool up against not that big of an enemy today. And so it seemed to work out better for him. Now, there were some things, I have to admit, I had to do a bit of Googling to find out that there was an opera by Richard Wagner called Percival. And it was controversial. The religious folks were like, we don't like that he's using religious imagery. And he's like, I never said Jesus. I just talked about the Holy Grail and the Spear of Destiny and talked about the Redeemer and the Savior and all this, but I never said Jesus. And but he also, here's a quote from Richard Wagner in reference to his play Percival, or his opera. When religion becomes artificial, art has a duty to rescue it. Art can show that the symbols which religions would have us believe literally true are actually figurative. Art can idealize those symbols and so reveal the profound truths they contain. I'm certain that Carl Jung would have been familiar with that controversy and familiar with that quote, and it seems to resonate a great deal with his concept of if I can make Gilgamesh admit that he's a fantasy, then I can introduce him to the people in the Western land where I come from. Not very subtle symbolism there, to the developing West, where there's technology and atheism and stuff. As a fantasy, and say, hey, here's an artistic fantasy in the human collective unconscious that I want to talk to you about. And they won't just say, oh, he's talking about Gilgamesh. Why is he talking about Gilgamesh? That's a Babylonian thing, and I'm scared of Babylonian things because my grandma was Christian and told me to be scared of Babylonian things, and even though I'm an atheist, I'm still scared of Babylonian things because I'm a post-Protestant, whatever. Then he can just say, okay, let's talk about Gilgamesh. And they're like, okay, I'm here, I'm with you. So his approach, and the fact that his soul, at one point, I don't know if it's come up yet in his journaling, but in book 1, where Sonu was doing the overview of his entire work, the entire Black Books, his soul had told him, what you're doing is art. And then he was reacting and rebelling against the idea that what he was doing was art. But I think he had to develop his understanding of the meaning of art and allow for science and art, for his science to be a kind of art and for religion to be a kind of art by elevating the definition of art. Like I've talked about on here, acting and working as in a God form in a ritual setting, to me are the same, but that doesn't diminish magic, but it elevates acting. So, yeah, I can resonate with that. And just a few small things. He had related the characters in Percival's opera, the opera called Percival, Wagner's opera, to the characters that he's been interacting with in as follows. Klingsnor was a guy who he wanted to join the Brotherhood of the Knights, so he tried to prove himself by castrating himself, and they still wouldn't let him in. So to get revenge, he built a castle and a garden with beautiful women to allure the knights, and he was apparently a necromancer. And so Amfortas, who he identifies as, or he's asking, was Amfortas the librarian? Amfortas was the ruler of the land, and he set out to defeat Klingsor. For doing what he did, for, I don't know, building this castle full of beautiful women to try to mess with the knights. And he was defeated, and then he had a mortal wound, and nothing could help him. Kundry was an older woman who was kind of magical. She was the Grail's messenger, and Carl Jung identifies her as the cook. And then Percival was the prophecy, pure fool enlightened by compassion. And Percival shows up and he walks straight into the castle to get the Grail or to get the Spear of Destiny or something. I don't know. I just sort of glanced over the notes, the synopsis. And he wasn't tempted by the women because he's a pure fool enlightened by compassion. He just walked by. They're like, hey, you want to come over here? And he's like, no, thank you. Sort of the opposite of Sir Galahad,
Well, I could stay a bit longer.
And, oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize until just this moment that scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail was very likely inspired by the opera Percival. You learn something every day. If you learned something today, click like and subscribe. Anyway, so Percival is able to heal Amfortas, and I think Carl Jung is Percival. He's the pure fool enlightened by compassion. He becomes one with himself. He becomes one with Percival, and he heals Amfortas somehow. I don't know how that interaction with the librarian, where he's like, here's the book. It was boring. You should fall asleep. Maybe by telling him to fall asleep in the kitchen, maybe that's going to save Amfortas' soul from his Nietzschean, nihilism or something. So Carl Jung seems to have become Percival in a sense. And so those are my thoughts on today's divination and how it relates to the reading.
All right. I look forward to becoming you and having said that, so that I will know what you have just said to these lovely folks. And let me see, is there anything else?
Hey, BT.
Oh, hey, Edward in the car.
Hey, what's happening?
Just recording Chicken Philosophy. I see you finally got the car back.
Yeah, we just got it back like an hour ago. Oh my God, after 12 days. Turned out it was done on Saturday. Anyway, exhausting. So Gwydion and I were wondering, I don't know if you caught The Secret of the Golden Flower and Meccan Revelations recently?
Of course.
Okay, well, just for the sake of anyone who missed it, I had remarked that, obviously the LVX formula has a much higher, more profound meaning. But if we were to take it on a lower level and assign you, me, and Gwydion each to one of the, life, death, and resurrection.
Right.
I had said that I perceived my self as life and Gwydion as death and you as resurrection. Gwydion had said he perceived himself as life, you as death, and me as resurrection. So we were just basically wondering what would be your take on it?
All right. There's three ways I can answer this. So in the order in which we go through, not in each individual book, but in each episode, like whose turn is it to record next, and then which book is it? As the wheel turns, it goes. Doesn't it go Edward, Gwydion, me, Edward, Gwydion, me? So you think your life, Gwydion is death, and I'm resurrection. Gwydion thinks he is life, I'm death, and you're resurrection. So based on that pattern, it seems like I'm supposed to say that I think I'm life, you're death, and Gwydion is resurrection. But I don't. I mean, I could try to like make a case for that. But rather than doing that, I'll go with my other two responses. Or perhaps three. Sorry if this is boring for anybody. You can tune out at this point if you want to. Originally, there was Edward. And then, if we don't count, other pen names that came along, then there was BT. And then eventually there was Gwydion. And there was a process that happened in all that. For one, there was Edward, and then there was death, the death of Edward's father, right? That preceded by a year and a month, right? Or a year and 2 months. A year and 2 months after Dad died, we were initiated and became BT. And then 3 years later, Mom died. So there was a lot of death going on. And then definitely, whoever Edward was before all that, we like to say, on here that he is no longer with us. But then sometimes we're inconsistent and we say that, the Edward is the same Edward that wrote that story in 1990 and that kind of thing. But whatever, however you look at it. But in this example, that Edward was the original kid. And then BT was the death of that Edward. And then Gwydion was what rose from the ashes. It's a funny thing to rise from the ashes, and he definitely thought that he was the Messiah originally. Carl Jung went through that phase, so did Gwydion. It was 2001. It was a long time ago. It was an embarrassing time. Definitely by the middle of 2001, he no longer thought that. So that's one level on which originally it went Edward is L, BT is V, Gwydion is X. But that all being said, more recently, I'll just say there's three ways I can answer it, and the third way, and the way that's most true in present time is that we've all gone through our processes. I know this is a cop-out answer. I'm not saying, this is this, this is this, and this is this. But definitely Edward went through a process of death in 2017 especially. And, it completely erased his life as it had been prior to that. As it was in 2016, his life was gone by middle of 2017. And then he went away. And then by the end of 2017, he had killed Gwydion too. So Gwydion was still recording. If you're interested, there's a podcast called Gwydion's Astral Podcast, and if you go toward the middle, you can, if you open one of those, you can start to kind of get where the dates are. And so mid to late 2017, Gwydion was going mad. And Edward had already died. That Edward, at that time. He was going through a death process. And then there's a big 5-year gap. So Taro was the last episode of Gwydion's Astral Podcast, and Gwydion ceased to exist after Taro, and then was resurrected again only with that American, whatever it was with the American flag, the patriotic love propaganda or whatever. So Gwydion went through a life, death, and rebirth process. And when he was reborn, his hat was blue. It started out black, and he went through a death process, and then it turned red. So we've all been through a number of LVX processes, which is pretty normal. Like you have pointed out a couple episodes ago, I think in Secret of the Golden Flower, it goes INR, INR, INR. So the resurrection part, kind of gradually becomes for one who is living a life in the world, gradually becomes the regular life again. So in other words, if a person has a great spiritual awakening when they're 20 years old, they can't just ride that one great spiritual awakening. Well, you can, but it'll start to look a little rusty by the time you're like 45 or 50, if you're still riding on the momentum of a religious experience you had when most of the cells of your body weren't even, the same. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. So you got to have more than one in life. Now, you don't have to necessarily turn your whole life upside down and erase your life as it was. You can go through it on various levels and in various ways, and in harmless ways that aren't that painful. Silencing the mind through meditation, for instance, can be a form of a good kind of death experience. And then the resurrection. So Gwydion Resurrected is the Gwydion that is co-host with us on Chicken Philosophy here at Weird. For a long time, he was running it solo. He did like a bunch of episodes in a row by himself. And I, of course, I went through many life, death, and resurrection processes. And sometimes we joke about how I'm not really here. I'm just a relic from the past, which is kind of like has an element of truth in it. But I'm the version of me that exists now as PT, and definitely had ceased to exist at various times and went through various LVX processes, that's what I'd say is overall. You could say on the long journey of life, there was an original LVX that happened where Edward was the L and I was the V and Gwydion was the X. But as for more recently, in recent years, this past decade, Edward, Gwydion, and BT have all been going through life, death, and resurrection processes. And even Pymander, Pymander, the one with the monk's robe, he went through a life, death, and resurrection process of his own. And if you're interested, he's the most recent of us. So if you're interested in me as Edward, the one behind the characters, if you're interested in me, like in recent years, then you can check out Pymander kind of pours his heart out about the life, death, and rebirth process that he went through that led him to decide to don the monk's robe that he famously wears when he appears on Chicken Philosophy and the one he wears on Buddhist Books Podcast. If you want to hear the story of how he became the Pymander he is today, he tells that story, and it dominates this video right here called The Round Table.
I didn't feel connected to that current as much as I did when I was young, and my only understanding of Tibetan Buddhism was through my dad.
It was the very first time that the four of us got together, and it planted the seeds for the form which Chicken Philosophy took in 2024. And anyway, for the people who are still here, hi. I'm not going to be here for a week. There's going to be a week hiatus from these crazy, silly Chicken Philosophy videos and a week hiatus from Buddhist books as well. That music outside. Anyway, my birthday is coming up. As I'm talking to you right now, it is the 17th. And Piu and I, Piu is my wife, by the way, happily married. Putting that out there for someone who's might need to hear it. So music's a little distracting. If you want to get me a birthday present, so my birthday is September 21st. So I'm leaving. Today's the last day online, 17th. You won't see me again until probably the 24th. So it's a good solid week break. If you would like to get me a birthday present, here's what you do. You go to edwardreed.com. You scroll down a little and click Books by Edward Reed. Now, there's tiers of what you can do. You're not going to get anything in return, but, it might make the difference between me going, oh, that's nice, and, oh, that's really nice, and, wow, that's really nice. That's all. That's the only record. That's what a gift is. A gift isn't a trade, So if you want to get me a gift, You can, once you click on books by Edward Reed, you can look at those descriptions, pick the one that seems the most interesting to you, and get yourself the Kindle version. They're all relatively low priced. The next tier up is you get T-I-E-R, not E-A-R, though you might tier up if you get, there's a couple of them that might tier you up. Anyway, it's not just all until you finish the book, like you go, there's more than one thing that happens in those books. You can get 2 books, you can get 3, you can get all 11. That includes, of course, I transcribed my dad's book, Transformations, that he wrote in 1976, but he didn't publish. I published it a few years back. Definitely welcome to get that one. And Sonnet 1, which is this. It's I wrote the program, and if you've seen Tron, then you will understand, and I won't even need to explain why Sonnet 1, the program, has this face. See, it's my face.
Alan.
Where did you hear that name?
Well, that's your name, isn't it?
The name of my user.
Anyway, so this is a book filled with his poetry. Now, this was before AI. He is a 1980s GW Basic program. So it's not like something that's trying to convince you that it's human. It's failing the Turing test, for sure. It's kind of like Mad Libs on crack, but it's Shakespearean sonnets, and it's like a couple thousand of them, or at least more than 1,000 Shakespearean sonnets in that book. And there's 2 books by Sonnet 1. Thomas and the Wolf, Taco, Iburito, Smaller Mouse, Small Gray Mouse. You don't need to get Smaller Mouse or Small Gray Mouse or Multiverse Cartographer. Just get yourself the New World Empire and the Interdimensional Coffee House, because that includes Small Gray Mouse, Smaller Mouse, and the Multiverse Cartographer. So you don't have to get all 11 unless you want to. I don't know why you would. So you can get all those on Kindle. And that would be like a substantial $25 gift or so, maybe $30 to get all of them, because they're, like I mentioned, they're relatively cheap on the Kindle version. Top tier, or top tiers, is to get yourself a physical copy of 1 book, 2 books, or all 11. That is the greatest gift that you could get me for my 46th birthday this year on September 21st. 2024, is to buy yourself a physical copy of every one of my books that you'll find at edwardreed.com by clicking books by Edward Reed. That's my shameless self-promotion in the form of a birthday present or whatever. Is there anything else? Have I forgotten anything? I think that's everything. I don't think I forgot anything. That's everything I planned anyway. This is the last time I'm going to be talking to you for like a week, so blessings from Goa, India, and until next time.